Hey guys, tonight we drift back a few hundred years into a place so lavish, so certain of its own perfection, that trouble seems impossible. Lanterns glow through silken screens, mandarins stroll polished courtyards, and below the carved roofs of the forbidden city, the air smells faintly of incense and river wind. You're standing in the heart of the Qing Empire, the richest, most self-assured civilization on Earth. Yet outside these golden gates, a shadow waits in cargo holds and wooden chests. It begins not with soldiers or kings, but with poppies. And before long, it will change everything. You probably won't survive this one, not without losing a few illusions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through a Beijing alley, moonlight rippling off wet cobblestones. The air feels thick. Spiced tea, sandalwood, distant smoke. Couriers hurry past carrying sealed messages for men in silk robes who've never seen the sea. At this moment, around the late 1700s, China sees itself as the Middle Kingdom, the luminous center of the world. The great Qing dynasty stretches from the snows of Tibet to the tropical plains of Canton. Foreigners, barbarians as the court calls them, may visit, might trade, but they never belong. In the emperor's eyes, the West is a curiosity. Strange clocks, stranger clothes, odd machines powered by coal, perhaps amusing, surely inferior. When the British envoy Lord Macartney kneels before the Qianlong Emperor in 1793, he offers cannons and telescopes. You hover by the gilded throne as the old ruler waves a jeweled hand and replies that China possesses all things in abundant measure, she lacks nothing. Historians still argue whether arrogance was blindness or simply confidence in centuries of prosperity. Either way, the West leaves insulted and plotting. You drift south with the traders along the Pearl River, past floating villages and vibrant markets. Ships crowd the harbors of Canton, the only port open to foreigners. The air buzzes with haggling porcelain for silver, silk for gold, and tea. Always tea. British merchants line up like caffeine-addicted pilgrims, desperate for the delicate leaves that London now worships daily. The problem? Every ounce of tea drains British silver straight into China's coffers, and almost none flows back. It's like feeding a vending machine that never gives change. By candlelight, the merchants grumble. You sense the tension. Every chest of tea is a nail in Britain's financial coffin. Somewhere across the Indian Ocean, another plant begins to glimmer in their minds, the poppy. A pale flower, hypnotic and lucrative. It turns out that the British Empire already controls Bengal, where opium flows under a sun that never sets. A certain bitterness curls in the air, not unlike burnt sugar. Someone mutters, what if silver could trickle the other way? For now, though, China remains serene. Against the horizon, the Great Wall cuts a jagged smile across mountains. Scholars study Confucian texts, convinced of unbroken harmony. Officials ban tobacco and gambling, yet addiction hums quietly through lesser vices. In tea houses, poots debate virtue. In taverns, sailors brag about Western voyages. And through it all, the emperors sleep soundly. The big dream, historians call it. The illusion of eternal balance. There's even a quirky practice spreading among the Manchu elite, using powdered pearls in medicine, thinking it cleanses corruption. Ironically, that superstition might have worked better if applied to the empire's politics. Ministers bribe examiners, tax collectors skim coins, and smugglers bribe their way through every coastal checkpoint. You wander from the palace corridors into the marshy docks of Guangzhou, and the mood changes. Sailors whisper about crates labeled silk yarn, but carrying something far more dangerous. The first opium shipments drift in quietly. Tiny at first, just over 1,000 chests per year. Merchants pretend ignorance, mandarins pretend blindness. After all, the profits pay for everything from temples to tailor shops. In the fortified warehouses, the sweet, earthy scent of raw opium starts seeping into the wood. No one calls it poison yet, it's just medicine, imported and refined. A fringe rumor whispers through the dock sunks that opium smoke grants visions of ancestors. Like incense on spirit night, that myth spreads faster than reason, and in back rooms, scholars experiment for inspiration. You watch one calligrapher write for 16 hours straight, convinced heaven is guiding his brush. Historians still argue whether the early Qing officials truly knew how addictive it was, or whether they chose ignorance to protect trade revenues. Night falls again. Lanterns glitter across the Pearl River like melted gold. In one small den behind a merchant's house, 3 men share a long bamboo pipe. You kneel beside them. One inhales deeply, exhales with a blissful sigh, and says, "It's like dreaming awake." The second calls it foreign incense. The third simply falls asleep mid-sentence. You can almost hear the empire exhale with them. Far away in London, the scent of gunpowder and profit mixes with ink on trade licenses. A new machine-age confidence grips the British Parliament. Officials debate whether moral scruples belong in commerce, and quickly decide they don't. Soon, India's factories hum, its poppies bloom, and its ships roll out toward China's shorelines. The arrangement seems clean tea for silver, silver for opium, opium for tea. A perfect circle. On paper, you float back to Beijing one last time tonight. Beneath banners of the dragon, ministers present glowing reports. Heaven favors us, they declare. Trade prospers. The emperor signs his scrolls, unaware that prosperity now has a faint, narcotic taste. Beyond the courtyard walls, beneath a tranquil moon, a soft smoke curls up from distant valleys. You lean closer, just enough to catch that scent. The beginning of something that will outlast dynasties. You wake to the rustle of parchment and the hiss of a teapot. The sound means business in Canton's market stalls, where everything that can be traded will be. You walk through a city that smells of salt, spices, wet hemp rope, and ambition. Here, Chinese merchants haggle with British factors under banners painted in both languages, the sort of improvised diplomacy where one wrong translation can spark a war or a fortune. Around you, the 18th century world economy whirls with feverish energy. Europeans crave everything: Oriental, porcelain fine as eggshell, silk that gleams like liquid light, and lie hoods, and a drink so addictive it might as well be narcotic. Tea. You drift through warehouses stacked with that green treasure. Leaves carefully dried and packed in carved wooden chests, their fragrance so sharp and floral that even a deep inhale feels expensive. The British East India Company ships them home by the ton, feeding an empire's new ritual tea time. You glide to London, where housemaids pour steaming cups beneath chandeliers, aristocrats debate poetry, dock workers gulp cheap blends in tin mugs. Britain becomes a nation fueled by tea, and in love with what China can provide. But every sip costs silver. Chests of it vanish eastward, pouring wealth into China's treasury. London bankers panic, noting the imbalance. One political pamphlet calls it a leak in the ship of state. You can almost smell the paper and panic. Something must change. Meanwhile, back in Canton, Chinese officials shrug. Foreigners bring tribute. They say, heaven smiles. The emperor's coffers overflow with Spanish and Mexican silver dollars, stamped with strange foreign faces but valued as universal coin. A quirky fact: those silver dollars circulate so widely in China that locals start carving tiny characters into them for trust. Personal marks of authenticity. Centuries before QR codes, you sense pride but also blindness. The Qing bureaucracy believes it controls trade completely through what they call the Canton system. One port, one guild, one set of rules. Foreign merchants are confined to factories along the waterfront, allowed to stay only part of the year. No women, no weapons, no missionaries. Every transaction must pass through Chinese intermediaries known as Hong merchants. It seems foolproof, but systems that never adapt begin to crack quietly. You pass by secret meetings in candlelight, where Western traders mutter in frustration. They want access inland, they want profit unchoked by red tape, and they want to trade more than silver. Silver is finite. Ambition isn't. One British trader sketches a poppy on a napkin. Just a doodle. We grow these by the field in Bengal, he says. What if we sold this instead of losing silver? Historians still argue whether that moment was a cunning strategy or sheer moral blindness. Either way, the seeds of destruction are already planted. Literally, you drift to India, where farmers in Bengal are forced to cultivate poppies under East India Company control. The blossoms look innocent, delicate pink flowers waving under a heavy sun, but their sap, once dried, becomes opium, sticky, potent, profitable. You float over rows that stretch miles across the plains. Laborers in rags work under watchful eyes, their wrist movements slow, almost rhythmic, as they score the poppy heads to bleed the juice. That same juice, packed and pressed, soon fills those same cargo holds headed toward Canton. Some Western merchants hesitate. After all, opium trade is technically illegal in China, but legality has never stopped profit. They call it private trade, wink included. Officially, the East India Company keeps its hands clean by auctioning opium to independent smugglers. Unofficially, everyone knows the destination. Meanwhile, China's economy hums. The tea-silver exchange feels eternal. Emperor Qianlong, elderly now but still razor-sharp in pride, celebrates his 80th birthday with fireworks that light up the capital's skyline like a thunderstorm made of gold. You glide above the crowd, watching petals of color bloom against midnight. It looks like power without end. Yet down south, subtle shifts begin. Ships from Calcutta anchor near Portuguese Macao. Small, fast junks dart in at night to buy cargo. The first clouds of opium smoke drift inland. Still whispered, not yet scandalous. Chinese demand for the drug grows quietly. It feels exotic, foreign, maybe even modern. A laughable irony. The same people who sneer at Western machines adore a Western narcotic. One fringe story drifts among sailors that some temples use opium in incense offerings to speed the journey of prayers. There's no evidence it was common, but you can almost imagine a tea priest swooning as spirals of blue smoke curl into the rafters, convinced they're glimpsing gods. Addiction, cloaked in holiness, and yet, to most citizens, this empire still seems invincible. The Grand Canal glitters beneath moonlight, post-riders ferry imperial decrees, scholars memorize the Confucian classics for civil exams. Tradition lays a heavy, comforting hand across everything. Progress is seen as noise, disruption, arrogance. You can feel it, an entire nation convinced it's standing still in perfection, while the world shifts beneath its feet. That stubbornness will cost dearly. By the late 1700s, global trade routes tighten, and British ships come armed not just with muskets but with balance sheets. Every voyage is a calculation. When you trace the routes on a parchment map, they form a shimmering triangle: tea eastward, silver westward, and soon, opium looping back like a snake biting its tail. A simple equation drives it all: profit over principle. It's the same flaw you'd find centuries later in different industries, just wearing new disguises. Maybe that's why the story feels eerily familiar. As dusk falls once more, you drift over the South China Sea, dotted with sails and clouds. Beneath the calm waves, iron anchors gleam like waiting teeth. You sense tension, profits blooming from deceit, respect rotting into resentment. From this quiet beginning, the greatest empire on earth is about to be hollowed from within, one puff of smoke at a time. You hover over Bengal's plains, where endless rows of pale pink poppies ripple beneath a harsh sun. The air smells faintly sweet, almost innocent, until you remember every blossom hides a darker purpose. You watch laborers stooped in the fields, their fingers deftly scoring the pods so milky sap seeps out and darkens in the heat. The British East India Company has turned agriculture into alchemy, transmuting blooms into addiction, pain into silver. Every drop is destined for China, where no one yet understands how devastating this little flower will become. By nightfall, The opium press houses glow like furnaces. Workers pack sticky resin into round cakes, stamp them with company seals, and stack them into wooden crates labeled Patna or Benares. When the overseer cracks one open to test purity, a soft, earthy scent fills the room. Rich, intoxicating, almost like burned honey. Even standing nearby, you feel lightheaded. The Queen's best export. One British officer jokes, half smiling beneath his moustache. Tia comes east, and dreams go west. Historians still argue whether the British Crown fully grasped the scale of what they'd unleashed or conveniently ignored it. Livelihood certain is that by the early 19th century, opium has become the empire's favourite financial fix. The East India Company's ledgers practically whisper greed. Each chest represents a small fortune, about 140 pounds of processed poison. Multiply that by thousands upon thousands, and you've got an economy sailing under false colours. You follow one of those ships, sleek, fast, the kind smugglers favour, cutting through the Indian Ocean under a waning moon. Crates are tucked low in the hold, hidden under bales of cotton. Every captain knows the game. Once you reach Macau or the coastal bays near Canton, you unload at night into Chinese junks, fast and quiet. The silver flows back before sunrise, neat stacks glittering in oil lamps. Nobody calls it smuggling, they call it commerce. On the Chinese coast, you drift through humid dusk. Bamboo scaffolds creak, fishermen call to one another, and deep in the warehouse districts, strange new smells hang in the air. The first opium smokers light slender pipes in secrecy, tongues of flame licking the darkness. The taste, they say, is like honeyed thunder, warming, slow, dizzying. A scholar in Guangfu records it as a friend of reflection. He writes one essay so poetic that later collectors think it was written mid-dream. You can almost see his ink brush trembling between euphoria and surrender. In the Forbidden City, however, news trickles northward unevenly. Couriers bring reports of declining productivity, of salt taxes falling short, of unknown illnesses spreading through coastal towns. Imperial officials file them away politely. Local problems, they conclude. After all, how could foreign merchants threaten the Middle Kingdom's spine of 600 million people? You pass above the palace roof where the Dorguang Emperor, a few decades later, will inherit this complacent empire and lose sleep trying to undo its consequences. For now, the British merchants grow bolder. Massive opium auctions in Calcutta begin attracting international bidders. The East India Company no longer hides behind contractors. It practically advertises the drug as a cornerstone of trade. One quirky footnoting, an early advertisement in India described opium as heap benign comfort to the industrious Chinese artisan. Talk about marketing spin centuries before social media. Each passing year, more ships join the route. By 1820, an estimated 5,000 chests reach Chinese shores annually. You stand on a dock watching crate after crate vanish into the misty delta. Like feeding something insatiable. The profits circle back through the system. Tea goes to London, silver goes to Calcutta, and the cycle tightens. It's economic magic, until someone realizes magic always demands a cost. In Canton, whispers about addiction spread. Soldiers caught sleeping on duty blame the foreign incense. Dockworkers sell heirlooms for just one more puff. Yet local officials, many newly rich from bribes, pretend ignorance. Trade must flow, they insist. The imperial bureaucracy acts like an organism allergic to bad news. Every warning inflames but never heals. A British opium agent named William John counts silver coins in his notebook, envisioning future empires. The market expands proportionally to indulgence, he notes coolly. You glance at the ink bleeding on his ledger. It resembles spilt blood more than writing. It's this sort of calculating detachment that defines the century. Still, not everyone cheers. Chinese reformers, tiny voices lost in endless paper, petition the throne. They describe ruined families, stolen futures, nightmares thick with smoke. One writer compares the drug to a demon sleeping in the chest, whispering its own name. You can almost hear that whisper now, faint but persistent. curling through the night air. Historians still debate how soon the imperial court realized that money was draining as quickly as morality. By 1832, silver exports reverse for the first time in memory, and the economy lurches. Banks panic, prices rise. The emperor's astrologers claim celestial imbalance, maybe offended ancestors. Reality, less potic, says too much opium, not enough silver. A final vision before dawn on one side of the world. British merchants toast their profits under gaslight. On the other, a Chinese farmer sells his wife's hairpin to buy another pipe. You float between them, feeling the gulf wide. Ignorance on one shore, indulgence on the other. Somewhere between the two, history clicks into place, an irreversible gear. The world's most magnificent empire has just been introduced to its sweetest poison. And you can already sense it's going to take a war to break the habit. You drift through a narrow canton alley at dawn, following a trail of incense, sweat, and something darker, an aroma both sweet and sour, laced with the faint caramel tang of burning resin. Somewhere behind a wooden door, someone exhales a long silver ribbon of smoke. Welcome to China's first wave of addiction. You push the door gently, a room flickers in lamplight. Pillows scattered, bamboo mats warped by ash, 3 figures wrapped in silk and fatigue. One scholar quotes poetry while another barely stays awake, his pipe resting on a lacquer stand shaped like a dragon's claw. The air is heavy, shimmering. They believe this is leisure, refinement, perhaps enlightenment. You can almost hear the denial beating like a pulsing "we are in control." The truth smells different. It smells like decay disguised as perfume and livelihoods. Step back into the streets and you'll see opium's tendrils reach far beyond the elite. Sailors save their wages for it. Shopkeepers store small portions in hidden jars, and even servants who once drank tea to stay alert now drift into daydreams during work. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It travels by word of mouth, passed between coins, whispers, and curious friends. By the 1820s, Canton transformed. Traders report swelling profits. Local authorities report swelling problems. You walk past docks where coolies stagger between carrying loads, some with eyes like molten glass from too many nights on the pipe. The once bustling warehouses now double as dens. There's always music. Plucked strings, slow and wistful, the soundtrack of surrender. Historians still argue whether the early officials believed the situation reversible. At first, they rationalized I told, let the weak perish, the strong will endure. But the weak soon included merchants, soldiers, even young officials. The Qing court built its prestige on Confucian virtue. Now it reeks of hypocrisy and tar. Not everyone smokes in shame. In certain circles, opium becomes fashionable, an art. Wealthy hosts furnish smoking rooms with carved couches, silken robes, and tiny ivory lamps shaped like lotus blossoms. The ritual is precise: heat the pipe, liquefy the pellet, inhale slowly. Conversation drifts to philosophy, gossip, and national pride. This foreign smoke reminds us of life's lotus bloom, brief, fragrant, irresistible. One put murmurs before slumping against the wall. You have to admire human creativity. We can romanticize our own destruction in any century. There's a fringe tale you overhear in a quieter corner, that some opium smokers believe the drug allows them to wander the yellow springs, the mythic realm of the dead, and return wiser. It's superstition, probably spread by those selling the finest spiritual grade pipe resin. But stories like that blur the line between religion and relapse. Economically, the empire begins to bleed. Silver, once bright and abundant, now drains from China like mercury bleeding from a cracked mirror. Prices rise, inflation eats savings, and tax revenues collapse. You can feel the anxiety seeping into court records, an undercurrent of disbelief. How could a nation with all the world's treasures be undone by smoke? Every attempt to ban the drug so far has failed, sabotaged by bribed officials and the unstoppable lure of profit. You journey north, where word finally reaches the Forbidden City. The Daguang Emperor, new to the throne, reads reports late into the night. His candle sputters as he mutters, "Foreign merchants poison my people." He orders crackdowns, but the empire's veins stretch too far and its arteries too clogged by corruption. Local magistrates raid a few dens ceremonially, seize some pipes, punish a few scapegoats, and then return to the real business of collecting taxes and favors. A historian once described this moment as the empire dreaming itself sober. That feels right. The Qing court believes a few punishments will cleanse centuries of rot. But down in the southern provinces, the dream grows deeper. Even soldiers guarding coastal forts now trade ammunition for opium balls. When war eventually comes, some of them will be 2 days to reload. You rest your gaze on one dockside tavern, partly hidden by mist. There, a group of British traders count silver coins by lantern glow. They call themselves merchants. But everyone knows the truth. They could be selling cannonballs, and the moral weight would hardly differ. The Chinese love it, one says shrugging. They choose to buy. No one forces them. Another adds dryly, besides, if we don't sell it, someone else will. It's hard to tell whether that's cynicism or prophecy. The opium itself isn't new to China. Medicinal use dates back centuries, but never before in this quantity, this purity, this unstoppable flood. You peer into a household shrine where incense burns beside a small opium pipe. The family's patriarch mutters a prayer to the ancestors, asking forgiveness for weakness. Even virtue begins to smell faintly like corruption. Historians still debate numbers, but by 1835 over 2 million addicts likely exist in China. That's enough smoke to cloud an empire, literally. The Qing dynasty's power was built on discipline, Confucian order, and the illusion that the Son of Heaven ruled through moral authority. But morality doesn't stand a chance against chemistry. Back in Canton, night falls again. The harbour simmering with lanterns looks peaceful, though you know better. Below deck, hundreds of crates await new buyers. In an opium den nearby, a young boatman lights a pipe, eyes half closed, murmuring that he tastes the moon. You watch the ember flicker, small and harmless looking. Then it fades, replaced by silence. And you realize, an empire can crumble not with explosions but with sighs. You wake to the clatter of palace bells echoing through Beijing's thick morning haze. Couriers race across tiled courtyards, silken banners flutter, and one man sits sleepless behind a desk piled high with petitions. Dorguang, the Son of Heaven, the 30-something emperor who has inherited a flawless empire on paper and a hollow one beneath. He rubs his temples as yet another scroll is unrolled before him. Reports from the southern provinces describing coastal corruption, fading tax shipments, and something incomprehensible. Thousands of citizens failing to rise in the morning, found cold beside small bamboo pipes. You can almost feel his pulse quicken. In a world governed by moral order, smoke has become sin made visible. The emperor calls the Grand Council. Ministers bow and shuffle, each more terrified of speaking the truth than of losing the war that hasn't yet arrived. It is said, begins one, that foreign merchants import an evil substance to entrap our humble subjects. You glance at the emperor's lips tightening. He's heard this before. This time, however, he decides the silence must end. For years, the Qing bureaucracy had treated the opium problem as an unfortunate side hustle to its tea trade, shameful but profitable. Now, Dorguang sees it as something almost spiritual, a contest between virtue and corruption, heaven's will and human weakness. He issues an edict declaring opium a vile poison that destroys souls and dismembers the state. He orders all smokers punished, dealers executed, and officials complicit stripped of rank. It's his first act of true rebellion against complacency. Historians still argue whether Dagoing's sincerity outweighed his helplessness. His heart was fierce, but his machinery brittle. You watch the couriers gallop south, scrolls tucked in lacquer tubes. Weeks later, magistrates read the imperial decree aloud in market squares. Commoners kneel to listen, some nodding, some smirking quiet behind folded fans. Everyone knows money moves faster than morality here. Still, the emperor seeks a savior. A man uncorrupted, loyal, incorruptibly moral. That's when you first hear the name Lin Zexu. For now, though, China's coastal officials scramble. Raids are staged for show. A few unlucky traffickers are arrested. Far more escape after. Gifts change hands. Local governors send back glowing reports. The plague declines. Moral health is restored. Lies polished into diplomacy. Meanwhile, shipments keep landing at humans' beaches, night after night. You visit one small fishing village where the crackdown has hit hardest. Soldiers pile confiscated pipes in the square and set them ablaze, the smoke rising ironically sweet over the crowd. Among them stands an old fisherman clutching a small bag of pellets. His entire fortune. Will heaven forgive us? He asks no one in particular. His son grabs the pouch and throws it into the fire. The old man weeps, coughing as the fumes curl upward. It's almost ceremonial. Exorcism by smoke. In another scene, a governor's nephew makes a fortune enforcing the new law by seizing opium from one British smuggler and selling it to another. Livelihoods. You call it corruption, he calls it efficiency. There's even a joke circulating among traders. The only thing illegal in China is getting caught. Still, the emperor perseveres. Every evening, he prays before the temple of his ancestors, whispering for guidance. None comes. In the stillness, he begins to imagine his country as a vast theater where everyone is memorizing the wrong script. He senses the moral decay not as a political problem, but as a haunting. You can almost picture him staring out over the palace rooftops, thinking the empire's spirit itself is being smothered. A British merchant in Macau writes his family that the crackdown is irksome, yet profitable. Restrictions drive prices higher, and demand refuses to fade. The more the emperor forbids, the more the people want. Economics 101 with a tragic punchline. A quirky fact from this time: opium dens begin incorporating ware-holes, shaped like auspicious symbols. Dragons, bats, lucky coins. So the fumes rise prettily while clients call it incense for fortune. A strange blend of spirituality and smuggling that shows how deep denial can run. Meanwhile, Britain listens impatiently across the sea. Opium revenue now props up the entire British trade balance with China. Losing it would crush their tea-driven economy. Parliament debates morality but votes profit. Wealth outweighs ethics, once again. Back in Beijing, Daguing scribbles in his diary, "If heaven is just, let righteous men arise." His wish will soon come true, though even righteousness can ignite war. When the name of Lin Zexu reaches his lips, he whispers it like a prayer of last resort. Historians still debate whether Daguing was visionary or merely desperate. What's certain is that by 1838, hope and fear have merged into the same thing. Outside the Forbidden City, the empire's streets hum with gossip about the clean official coming to end the plague. You feel the shift. Smoke meeting steel, moral fury meeting mercantile arrogance. And somewhere near Canton, British traders toast under lanterns, raising glasses not of tea but gin. One laughs, "Let the dragon roar. We've caged bigger beasts before." The others cheer, and livelihoods, utterly unaware that they've just challenged not only an empire's laws, but its very sense of cosmic order. You drift upward through the haze of both pipe smoke and destiny. A new wind stirs inland, carrying rumors that soon the southern sea will burn like a gigantic pipe bowl tipped into fire. The emperor's faith has finally moved him to act, and when faith meets commerce, the world tends to explode. You drift south to Canton again, where humid air shimmers off the Pearl River and merchants whisper that the new imperial commissioner has arrived. His banner bears 4 characters that strike fear and admiration in equal measure. Qin Chadaching, imperial envoy of total authority. Beneath that banner walks Lin Zexu, the emperor's last earnest hope, cutting through the chaos like a man immune to distraction. You can almost feel the tension ripple ahead of him. For the first time in years, the smugglers stop smiling. Lin Zex isn't a soldier or an aristocrat, but a scholar. Thin, sharp-eyed, and endlessly sober. You watch him stride through Canton's streets, inspecting customs houses, counting crates, taking meticulous notes. Every accusation is verified, every lie peeled apart like rotten bamboo. He refuses bribes, travels without luxury, and sleeps 4 hours a night. One clerk confides, he frightens even his shadow. If virtue were a weapon, Lin carries a blade sharper than any British cannon. Within weeks, he calculates that nearly 200 foreign traders are bringing opium into China each year. His plan: end it, brutally and completely. He summons the foreign merchants to an assembly, where interpreters strain to translate his thunderous speeching. Your country speaks of righteousness and humanity. Do you sell poison in friendship? If heaven is not blind, how will it spare you? Even the British, who don't understand the words, understand the fury. Historians still argue whether Lin's moral absolutism was realistic or suicidal. One thing's clear: he meant every syllable. When the merchants hesitate, Lin does the unthinkable. He blockades their factories. No cargo may enter or leave until all opium is surrendered. Trade halts. Tension rises like steam trapped under an iron lid. British merchants pound their tables in fury. Some demand military protection, others call for compromise. But Lin is immovable. At the edges of the city, rumors swirl like smoke. Deville's soldiers sharpening blades, junks patrolling the river, distant villages stockpiling grain as if for siege. Still, no battle yet, only silence thick enough to bruise. And then it happens. You hover above Human Beach, a wide stretch of muddy delta under a hot May sun, 1839. Lin Zexi stands in a blue robe, his gaze steady as if speaking directly to heaven. Around him are mountains of wooden chests, 20,000 of them, stacked in rows like tombstones. Inside each chest, priceless cargo, India's finest opium, seized from British traders after weeks of standoff. Soldiers crack them open, dumping the sticky brown resin into trenches lined with lime and seawater. The smell is unforgettable, a mix of honey, vinegar, rot, and something almost metallic. As the acid reeks, the opium turns black, bubbling, hissing, dissolving into sludge. Waves lap the shore, pulling tendrils of poison out to sea. Lin watches without a blink. You drift closer, hearing the clink of coins as some soldiers tremble. Temptation is unbearable. A few mutter, "This is our money washing away." One officer glares them silent. And then, as the tide rises, Lin orders prayer offerings to heaven, a Confucian ceremony to cleanse both land and spirit. "Let this poison return to the void," he says. Somewhere beyond mortal sight, the empire's gods surely turn their heads to look. Modern historians call this the single most dramatic act of drug control in world history. Over 1,000 tons of opium destroyed. No half measures, no compromises. Even today, the spotted human still smells faintly of salt and defiance. But righteousness has consequences. Across the sea, when news reaches London, Parliament erupts. Some members applaud Lin's moral clarity, others howl for vengeance and compensation. British traders cry that private property, though illegal in China, has been unjustly seized. An angry question coils through Westminster. Shall we let the Celestial Empire dictate our commerce? The answer, inevitable, is no. From this moment, war becomes a matter of scheduling. British engineers chart coastlines, naval officers polish brass, and one cynical clerk summarizes it best: "Their virtue threatens our revenue." Back in Canton, Lin Zex knows the storm is forming. He writes to Queen Victoria herself, a letter polite yet blistering, imploring her to act as a sovereign who would never allow such moral corruption in her own lands. He seals it with respect. The Queen never reads it. Somewhere, perhaps, it still sits misfiled in a London archive. History's unread plea. A quirky note: Chinese villagers later collected bits of solidified opium from the human trenches, thinking them relics of heroism. Some carved the chunks into charms for protection against demons, unaware the toxins still lingered inside. Even righteousness leaves residue. As dusk falls over the delta, you hover beside Lin one last time. His face is calm, almost serene, Yet you can't miss the exhaustion behind his eyes. He has faced thieves, liars, and addicts, but soon he'll face ironclads. He turns to the sea, veil of evening light shimmering over the horizon. If heaven upholds justice, he murmurs, this nation will endure. You know the truth, he cannot, or heaven's answer is coming, carved in cannon fire. The sea around the Pearl River looks calm at first, as if pretending not to know what's coming. Bright junks drift lazily between sandbanks, fishermen cast nets, and children laugh on the docks. Then, one dawn, the horizon grows strange. You glimpse faint shapes at the waterline. Dark, angular silhouettes too straight for any Chinese vessel. The laughter stops. Someone murmurs, iron ships. That's how Britain arrives. Gunboats, livelihoods, bristling with cannons and powered by paddle wheels that hammer the waves like steady thunder. Britain has come to negotiate. But their bargaining chips are made of steel and shrapnel. Traders scurry to identify themselves under white flags, and Chinese officials write desperate letters upstream for reinforcements. The empire's illusions are about to meet industrial reality. You hover above one of the first clashes near the Pearl River in late 1839. A British frigate braves the current while coastal batteries fire loose, hurried shots, smoke clouding the air. The return volley is like lightning, controlled, measured, horrifying. British shells tear through wooden junks as if they were made of paper. Sailors dive into the murky water, some never surface. Within minutes, the ocean glows faintly with oil and fire. Historians still argue whether this was a battle or a massacre. Either way, it's a preview of the century to come. Through the chaos, Lin Zexu sends urgent reports to Beijing. His words burn with moral outrage but tremble with realism. Their ships defy the wind. Their guns strike thrice for every one of ours. You can feel his pride cracking. He had tried to fight vice with virtue, but the empire now faces a calculus of iron. In London, newspapers frame the war as a matter of trade freedom. Editorials thunder, China must open. The word open sounds merciful until you realize it always arrives with bayonets. Parliament debates, moralists protest, and businessmen shrug. The vote passes narrowly. Britain sails to war officially in 1840. The Opium War, though no one yet calls it that, becomes the first industrial conflict between East and West. You shift scenes. North wind rustling sails along the Chinese coast. British naval forces strike swiftly from port to port, Chusan, Ningbo, even up to the mouth of the Yangtze. Every victory looks effortless. Chinese defenders fight bravely but with mismatch, bows and smoothbores against precision artillery. A Chinese eyewitness later said, the sea itself trembled. Somewhere inland, newspapers printed with wooden blocks declare victory anyway. Barbarians repelled. It's pure fiction, but morale is a resource too. Imperial propaganda insists heaven stands with China. Yet every coastal commander knows heaven feels suspiciously absent when cannonballs sing past your ear. You drift low over a battered fort, smoke curling into clouds, rubble warm with the day's heat. Dozens lie wounded soldiers cuffing through black powder ash. Amid the ruin, a coin glitters. Silver, newly minted with a foreign monarch's face. The irony stings silver, the root of the opium trade, now funds the weapons destroying those trying to ban it. A fringe legend emerges that during one naval raid, a local fisherman tried to ward off British ships using giant mirrors, believing sunlight could scare demons away. It didn't, but the story lingers as a symbol of how superstition met science and lost decisively. Daoguang's rage burns through the bureaucracy. In the Forbidden City, courtiers whisper as he slams memorials onto marble tables. He can't believe his empire, guardian of ritual, haven of harmony, is losing to a distant nation barely the size of one province. Pride is cracking like lake lice in spring. Ministers tremble before the emperor's fury, and one daring advisor suggests negotiating. Negotiate, Daoguang spits, with criminals. But reality is stubborn. By 1841, British forces capture key forts along the coast, seize ships, and march unchallenged through defenses. Their discipline shocks local militias accustomed to banner pomp and martial ceremony. For the Qing Empire, war no longer looks gallant. It looks loud, mechanical, meaningless. Lin Jexu, still in Canton, loses sleep over every report. He writes that heaven weeps for the suffering of innocents. The emperor, however, blames him for failure and removes him from command. History's cruel twisting. The one man who tried to save China from poison is dismissed just as the poisoners demand compensation. You peer over Canton River again. British gunboats float like predators at rest, their decks neat, polished, terrifyingly quiet. The Chinese junks nearby sag with patched sails. A heavy rain begins, lively, washing away gunpowder residue from the decks, but not the shame that hangs in the air. Historians compare this moment to a doorway creaking open, the first entry of Western imperialism into China's long-sealed world. Behind the justifications, free trade, mutual respect, diplomacy, lurks the blunt truth: one nation is forcing drugs at gunpoint onto another. When the rain eases, the sea smells of salt, gun oil, and burnt opium. A British officer writes in his journal that evening, "The Chinese fought like lions, though their arms were useless." Another adds dryly, "They must learn commerce the civilized way." You almost wish irony were lethal. At Canton's docks, locals gather debris: broken pipes, splintered masts, pieces of cannon fused by heat. A boy picks up a chunk of brass, rubs it clean, and says, "We'll melt this into a bell so we never forget." Maybe they didn't know how right he was. The echoes of those bells will toll for decades. The guns fall silent, but the air still buzzes with grief. You drift over Canton, now occupied and uneasy, its river littered with burned hulls and drifting barrels. British officers stroll the waterfront as though touring a trophy gallery. Chinese merchants bow stiffly, calculating how to survive this new reality. And livelihoods. Above them all looms the knowledge that an empire once thought untouchable has bled, and the wound will never fully heal. Negotiations crawl forward like ghosts through smoke. Both sides claim honor but seek advantage. In June 1842, after 3 weary years of fighting, the Qing court sends envoys to meet the British commander, Sir Henry Pottinger, aboard a warship anchored off the Yangtze Delta. The envoys dress in formal silks, holding jade tablets of authority. The British officers appear in pressed uniforms gleaming with polished brass. The contrast feels obscene. Ceremony facing cannon. You hover above the deck as the papers are signing the Treaty of Nanking. Ink spills like a dark omen across parchment. Historians still argue whether the Chinese fully understood the document's permanence, but one thing is clear: the age of unequal treaties has begun. The ink dries, the balance breaks. Under its terms, China pays an indemnity of 21 million silver dollars, money that might have rebuilt villages instead, and cedes Hong Kong in perpetuity. The phrase sounds harmless until you realize it means forever. 5 ports must open to British trading: Canton, Ningbo, Fuzhou, Amoy, and Shanghai. Tariffs are fixed, not chosen. Consuls gain residence rights. In modern language, it's as if China has leased pieces of itself to foreign corporations with veto power. You drift through Shanghai's muddy wharfs a few years later and see it in motion: foreign settlements sprouting like mushrooms after rain. Gas lamps light streets where mandarins refuse to walk. Traders in top hats sip sherry beside tea farmers who no longer own their fields. And everywhere you look, the same contradiction: prosperity built upon degradation. In Beijing, Dorgoing receives the treaty with shaking hands. One clerk tries to soften the words, "temporary concessions, perhaps?" The emperor snaps, "There is no temporary humiliation before heaven." Then, in private, he orders the document locked away like a cursed relic. For days afterward, no music is played in the imperial court. Even birds seem quieter beneath the yellow eaves. Yet life, stubborn as ever, resumes. You follow a Canton boatman who now ferries opium openly through new, legal channels. What Lin Zexu once called poison is now business with official receipts and Western seals. In a single ironic stroke, vice transforms into commerce. Officials who once condemned the trade now issue docking permits. Addiction has become infrastructure. Still, resentment simmers under the polite veneer. Scholars curse treaty merchants. In new poems, street preachers claim heaven's wrath will strike foreign devils. On the other side, British officers write home about civilizing a backward nation, genuinely convinced they've done good. One even sends his mother an embroidered pillow labeled souvenir of China, sewn by an addict's trembling hands. The empire of irony expands. A curious side effect appears: English words leak into Chinese for the first time. Sailors pick up rough phrases. Number 1. Okay. Good price. To most people, these new sounds feel invasive, awkward, but they're the language of modernity now, unavoidable as smoke. You walk through opium dens glowing softly under new prosperity. Pipes clink, silver clinks louder, and somewhere a flute plays an old melody about lost honor. A merchant sighs. Heaven allows the strong to win. He's wrong. Of course, heaven merely watches. There's a fringe tale of one scholar who insisted the Opium War was heaven's testing and livelihoods. Those who resisted the drug would ascend after death. Those who yielded would reincarnate as beasts of burden. He ended up infamous not for prophecy but for overdosing during meditation. Faith and irony, forever dancing in circles. Historians still debate whether China could have rearmed, modernized, and recovered at this stage. Some argue the Qing court's cultural pride prevented reform. Others point out the empire's sheer size made change nearly impossible. Whatever the reason, this treaty marks the true crack in the dragon scales. Meanwhile, Britain toasts victory. London stock prices surge, merchants celebrate, and caricatures in newspapers depict Chinese mandarins bowing to British soldiers. The opium question vanishes into patriotic rhetoric, rewritten as a triumph of free trade. Public memory works fast when guilt tastes expensive. On the docks of Hong Kong, construction begins in earnest. Hammers ring, saws rip through imported timber, and colonial clerks sketch neat city grids where once only turtles basked. You pause above the infant colony. It smells of salt, lime plaster, and ambition. A British surveyor points at a fog-covered mountain and declares, "We'll put the governor's house there." No one asks what mountain spirits might think. At night, above the same harbor now bristling with masts, a young Chinese poet writes by candlelight. He dips his brush, pauses, and whispers, "We sold our breath to buy silence." Then he blows out the flame, leaving his words and his nation floating between smoke and shadow. You drift through the narrow waterways of southern China at sunrise, where pale mist curls above muddy banks and the reflection of a paper lantern trembles in the water. The war is over, but the peace feels fraudulent, like a stage set built over ruins. Trade has resumed, yes. Ports are buzzing, yes. Yet every coin exchanged carries the faint metallic scent of humiliation. Along Canton's docks, the British flags flutter with irritating confidence. Silvers pile up again, but this time, the flow is reversed. You trail a sailor hauling crates marked Patna. Still opium, now legal. The law that once made him a criminal now makes him a taxpayer. History has a dry sense of humor. Inside one of the new treaty warehouses, you watch as scales weigh the sticky brown blocks. Numbers are scribbled, stamps applied, silver coins exchanged. To avoid embarrassment, Chinese clerks record the transaction as foreign medicine, not opium, a tiny linguistic disguise to hide a vast moral defeat. Historians still argue whether new open ports created modernization or dependency. What you see tonight is simpering, a civilization slowly teaching itself to tolerate poison because profit demands it. The addiction deeps. Scholars who once debated Confucian ethics now hide pipes in their writing desks. Soldiers smoke to steady nerves. Households pawn ancestrals for the next dose. You drift through one modest home. A woman feeds her husband's habit by selling silk to foreign traders, though she refuses to speak their language. In the corner, her son imitates smoke rings with a toy flute. The irony would make even a jaded historian flinch. In the great inland cities, silver shortages return with a cruel twist. With opium payments draining specie, peasants see taxes rise, grain prices double, and wages crumble. Local economies collapse into barter. The emperor relaunches anti-opium edicts. But even his palace servants whisper that traders now pay taxes with contraband hidden inside tea chests. The empire, once fragrant with jasmine, now smells faintly of burnt resin. Through smog and incense, you glide over the Confucian academies, where frayed scholars now argue that heaven must be punishing China not for corruption but for arrogance. Others defend tradition, fiercelag. Let foreigners have their machines, we have the classics. You can almost hear heaven sigh in disappointment. Meanwhile, British and American traders compete eagerly. The cityscape transforms. Brick warehouses, Gothic churches, gas lamps, all sprouting beside Chinese temples. A Shanghai writer calls it a city of mirrors, each side reflecting the other's delusion. You pass streets where signboards shout in both languages, opium taxa hanji miss and scroll. There's a quirky detail from this era. To control moral panic, the Qing court orders painters to create warning posters illustrating a skeleton in Mandarin robes, pipe in hand, wasting away. The irony, collectors in Europe buy them as exotic art. Somewhere in a London parlour, one now hangs beside a portrait of Queen Victoria, admired purely for its oriental clarity. You wander back to Canton's riverfront, hearing both laughter and coughing from the same row of houses. Foreign traders clink glasses with local merchants at banquets where opium pipes are passed like cigars. Nobody calls it addiction anymore. It's habit. Denial has evolved linguistically, which somehow makes it more efficient. Across the Pearl River, those not in the trade grow restless. Farmers displaced by falling grain prices wander into cities looking for work. Some join secret societies promising revenge on foreign devils. Hidden pamphlets circulate, half prophecy, half threat, declaring that heaven will soon cleanse the Middle Kingdom. The Qing officials rip them down, confident they can control even faith by decree. Historians still debate whether the opium problem or the economic inequality it caused mattered more. Both are symptoms of the same diseasing imbalance. Silver flows one way, smoke the other, and truth drifts somewhere between them. By the late 1840s, opium imports more than double pre-war levels. You hover over ledgers inked neat and proud, evidence of expansion disguised as prosperity. In their shadows, families collapse one by one. The empire's economy looks stable, but its conscience has been sold wholesale. In Beijing, Dorguing grows older, his beard streaked with grey. He avoids the mirrors now, unable to face the reflection of his reign's legacy. News reaches him that in Hong Kong, colonial courthouses judge Chinese subjects under British law. A line once divine, the emperor's justice, has eroded into bureaucratic footnotes. The Son of Heaven himself is losing heaven. Everywhere, you sense contradiction reform slogans scribbled beside opium dens, temples accepting donations from traffickers, moralists citing profit as patriotic duty. A scholar sighs, we bought peace with our virtue. He's right, though he doesn't realize vert doesn't draw interest like silver does. A final image lingers before the night ends. On a lonely ferry between Canton and Hong Kong, a young apprentice lights a pipe to chase seasickness. The flame flickers blue and gold, his eyes glaze, and the river's reflection trembles around him. Behind that calm, the empire drifts further toward an abyss that no amount of silver can fill. You float eastward through the haze of a restless decade. The year is creeping toward the 1850s, and the empire hums like a beehive that's lost its queen. The war with Britain is technically over, but its ripples have turned into waves of misery. Villages empty, granaries rot, and smoke, always smoke, drapes the fields like fog. Beneath polite silence, you can sense something stirring, dangerous, and raw rebellion. As you drift along muddy roads south of Nanjing, you see it building from the ground up. Farmers, ruined by taxes and addiction, mutter against the state. Secret societies bloom like mold. The Triads, the White Lotus, and the most alarming of all, the God worshippers, led by a strange man who claims to have met Jesus in a dream. His naming Hong Shukwon, you'll meet him soon enough. But for now, you watch the tension sharpen. In one village, officials arrive to collect taxes in silver no one owns anymore. Desperate peasants offer sacks of grain, baskets of chickens, even heirlooms. The collectors smile grimly. We accept silver only. When they depart with nothing, soldiers touch the barns. Smoke climbs into the sky again, a blending with opium haze until you can't tell which is crime and which is policy. Historians argue whether addiction or inequality lit this fire. Both are kindling. Every chest of imported opium drains silver northward. Every chest of silver missing means more taxes squeezed from the poor. Foreign poison, domestic misery. A scholar writes bitterly in his diary, not realizing he's describing the logic of empire itself. In cities, the social fabric phrase. Once proud mandarins pawn their official hats for cash, soldiers rent out their weapons to bandits. Families sell daughters as servants to pay debts. At tea shops, worn-out men debate fate. Heaven has turned its back, one says. Another replies with a laugh so hollow it could crack porcelaning. Maybe heaven's just smoking too. You pass through opium dens where the smell of burned poppy clings to everything. Clothes, hair, even dreams. Addicts drift in near silence, their faces slack and peaceful. You notice something tragic yet symmetrical. The British pipe designs have now become local fashion, decorated with dragons and verses about tranquility. Destruction has learned to look elegant. Yet amid the ruin, another current moves. Anger disguised as prophecy. In the rice fields, preachers whisper of divine vengeance. The foreigners will fall like dust. Heaven's thunder will strike their iron ships. You see farmers pause mid-plow, listening. For them, faith is the only currency left when silver is gone, and vengeance can be purchased with belief alone. Meanwhile, foreign merchants in Shanghai and Canton toast their earnings. Exports boom. Warehouses overflow with silk and tea purchased at obscene discounts from desperate traders. When asked about China's suffering, one British dealer writes homing, "It is not our task to cure their ills, only to partake of their commerce." You can almost hear the universe sigh. A quirky footnote occurs around this time. Some Chinese apothecaries start marketing anti-opium, tonics made from ginseng and green tea, claiming they purge addiction. None work, but their labels, bright phalanxes rising from ashes, become ironic symbols of hope. Quack medicine fighting real poison. Still people buy them because hope, even diluted, sells. In Beijing, Dorguang's reign limps forward. He issues another decree banning opium, though half the officials who stamp it are users themselves. A courier murmurs that the ink of the edict smells faintly of the same sweet resin it condemns. Bureaucracy, it seems, can also be addictive. Then comes famine. Rivers flood, locusts swarm, grain shipments vanish into corruption. For millions, the line between hunger and high blurs. One numbs the stomach, the other the soul. You glide over a refugee camp near the Yangtze, gaunt faces, cuffing children, and opium lamps glowing even here amid ruin. The empire's veins look hollow. The once vibrant dragon now twitches in its sleep, unsure whether it's dreaming or dying. Historians still debate where the Qing might have turned the tide. Some blame weak reform, others divine disfavor. The truth is simpler. No empire survives when its people trade dignity for sedation. And yet, sedatives remain easier to export than salvation. Beyond Canton, in missionary schools funded by Western churches, you hear a different story being taught, that China's suffering will lead it to salvation through Christianity. The teachers preach compassion, though their ships arrived just after war cannons. Some Chinese converts believe sincerely, others attend for the free rice. But faith, like opium, is spreading. Another foreign substance disguised as comfort. You float again to Hong Kong, that accidental colony born of vice. It hums like a hiving, merchants counting ledgers, soldiers drilling, preachers shouting, sailors carousing. Neon doesn't exist yet, but the lamps in colonial clubs glow like prophecies of what will come. To outsiders it looks like progress. To those on the mainland, it's the gleaming edge of humiliation. One evening, you hover above both worlds, the glittering harbor and the dark hinterlands, and it hits Yug. The empire hasn't fallen yet, but there's a sound beneath everything like porcelain cracking. Somewhere in that sound hides rebellion. Somewhere in the smoke, flames are already waiting for air. You hover over a small southern village where roosters crow against a grey dawn, wooden shutters rattle in thin wind, and whispers carry news stranger than smoke. A man named Hong Xiuquan has started preaching salvation. Not the old Confucian kind, but something wholly foreign, dressed in borrowed visions. He calls himself the younger brother of Jesus Christ, chosen to cleanse China of demons, idols, and corruption. You can almost hear the universe chuckle at the audacity. Hong's story begins years earlier, during the height of opium's reign. A failed scholar from Guangdong, poor but proud, he had once collapsed from exhaustion after another shattered civil service exam. In fever dreams, he meets radiant beings who call him little brother, telling him that idols pollute the earth and must be destroyed. When he later discovers Christian tracts left by missionaries, their words match his visions perfectly. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether divine inspiration or delusion struck that day. Now in the 1850s, Hong's dreams have turned militant. He gathers followers under a new faith, equal parts Christianity, Chinese mysticism, and sheer rebellion. They call themselves the Taping Heavenly Kingdom. You drift through their early assemblies, men and women kneeling together, shockingly radical, chanting hybrid hymns where Bible verses mingle with folk rhythm. The message is electric: no more corruption, no more Manchu rule, no more opium. You notice the power of that last phrase. For peasants who've watched fathers and sons fade into addicts, it sounds like salvation made tangible. They trade pipes for prayer, glassy eyes for zeal. Hong forbids opium entirely, along with gambling, alcohol, and, awkwardly, concubinage. Purify the world for heaven's rule, he proclaims, while wearing an ornate crown of his own design. The irony isn't lost on you. As his army grows, it becomes less sermon and more storm. Farmers become soldiers, wives become quartermasters, and former addicts now wield swords painted with scripture. You march beside them as they shout, "Destroy demons! Save the people!" Firelight flickers across homemade banners. The empire feels it coming. The shaking of the dragon's tail before it wakes in pain. Beijing's officials underestimate Hong at first, assuming he's just another rural fanatic. But by 1851, his forces have defeated imperial troops and declared a rival kingdom in the interior. The opium-soaked Qing Empire suddenly faces an enemy that doesn't crave silver or smoke, only purity. The paradox is dazzling. Foreign narcotics weakened China's body, but a homegrown prophet would now tear its soul apart. You travel with the taping army through Guangxi province. Along the roads, broken idols and confiscated pipes lie crushed underfoot. Some addicts beg to join, swearing repentance. Others are executed as tools of demons. In a grim echo, one captured official begs for his life by promising to burn his possessions. Hong orders him to burn the opium instead. Symbolism made literal. A strange blend of idealism and fanaticism colors everything. The tapings establish gender equality in administration. Women as officers, accountants, even generals. Radical for their time. Yet suspicion festers too. Visions dictate strategy, prophecies override logistics. And though Hong preaches divine grace, dissenters vanish quietly at night. Every paradise carries its own shadows. Through the clang of swords, you overhear one captured imperial soldier gasping, "Why fight? We're both Chinese." The taping commander answers evenly, "Because yours worships silver, and ours worship heaven." It's a brutal simplicity no philosopher could out-argue. Meanwhile, in Western newspapers, the rebellion is romanticized. Some missionaries praise Hong as a Christian deliverer of China. Others recoil at his hybrid theology. Foreign merchants mostly just worry their trade routes will burn. Ironically, while the tapings destroy opium stockpiles inland, British financiers continue importing it happily along the coasts. Economics, like sin, rarely picks sides. You drift over Nanjing, the old Ming capital, now newly conquered by taping armies. Smoke rises from the city gates, the imperial garrison has been annihilated, and Hong renames the city Tianjin, heavenly capital. There's ceremony, singing, and a palpable sense of rebirth. Thousands fill the streets waving banners stitched with the character for heaven. For a moment, you almost believe this might be redemption. Then come the cracks. Discipline of moral fire turns into purges. Suspected traitors are executed in droves. The celestial laws multiply faster than believers can memorize them. And though opium is banned, confiscated stashes mysteriously reappear in officers' quarters. Hypocrisy flows back like floodwater through holes in the dam. Historians still debate how close the tapings came to victory. Some say had they marched north sooner, Beijing might have fallen and the dynasty with it. Instead, years of overconfidence and fanatic administration bogged them down. The heavenly kingdom becomes another court. Holy titles, inner circles, betrayal, smoke replaced by incense, addiction by ideology. Fitting in a grim sort of way. Still, the idea they plant lingers that China could change from within, without foreign masters, without opium's shadow. In some corner of history's great archive, you sense that spark waiting to return. Centuries later, names changed, dream intact. For now, the Middle Kingdom burns with too fierce moral and chemical. The taping further spreads north like lightning, and the imperial court scrambles terrified. The scholars who once feared addiction now face something even more uncontrollable: belief. You drift high above the land as it flickers below. Between the coast's smoke dens and the rebels' campfires, the night glows unevenly, like a dragon breathing through two throats, one coughing poison, the other spitting prophecy. You drift low over the Yangtze Basin, where fields should glow gold with ripening rice, but instead the landscape is scarred. Campfires, trenches, and columns of smoke that don't smell like incense or opium, but like war. The taping heavenly kingdom has burst across southern China, and the Qing court now fights a civil war on one front while foreign powers loom smugly along the coasts. The empire that once feared nothing now fears everything at once. You follow a taping marching column as it winds along a dirt road, banners snapping in the wind. On their flags, characters for heavenly peace flutter above men whose faces are anything but peaceful. Some were former addicts, now zealots. Some were peasants whose land taxes became unbearable once silver drained into the opium trade. Their leader, Hong Xiuquan, sits behind the lines in his heavenly palace, issuing proclamations that sound like scripture but read like policy. He's banned opium, gambling, prostitution, and foot binding across his territories, promising a purified kingdom in exchange for absolute obedience. You move closer to the front, where theory dissolves into mud and blood. A taping detachment overruns an opium depot held by imperial troops. Instead of looting, they drag out the crates, smash them open, and dump the sticky bricks into a river. The water thickens, shining with oily sheen before carrying the poison of foreign demons downstream. A commander recites Hong Edict, no smoke in heaven's land. The irony is sharp. While foreign powers forced opium into Qing ports at gunpoint, this homegrown rebellion burns it as heresy. Historians still argue whether the taping rebellion was mainly a religious revolution, a social uprising, or a side effect of the Opium War-damaged economy. To you, walking among ruined villages, it feels like all three braided together: faith, hunger, and livelihoods and humiliation twisting into a single rope's enough to strangle a dynasty. You glide into a contested town near Nanjing, where imperial troops and taping forces have traded control 3 times in 1 year. Walls are scorched, wells fouled, and in a shattered tea house, you see the past and future collide. On one side, an opium pipe lies cracked in the ashes. On the other, a torn taping pamphlet promises land for all under heaven. Neither promise has survived the fighting. Foreign merchants watch this cause from a safe distance. In Shanghai's foreign concession, British and American traders monitor the rebellion like investors following a volatile stock. Opium imports continue, even rise. War is good for business when both armies need money. One London columnist even speculates that a weakened Qing government will be easier to negotiate with after the smoke clears. Civilization, it seems, always finds a way to bill its victims. There's a quirky moment in this messel at one point, and livelihoods. Taping leaders flirt with the idea of gaining foreign recognition by emphasizing their Christian identity, even as missionaries denounce their theology as heretical. Imagine trying to pitch yourself as a brand-safe alternative to the Qing, while also burning traditional temples and rewriting the Ten Commandments. It doesn't land well. You move through taping-held Nanjing, Tianjin, the heavenly capital. Streets are reorganized, land deeds rewritten, social hierarchies flipped. Women serve as officers, men and women are strictly segregated in living quarters but nominally equal before heaven. On paper, it's a radical experiment in justice. In practice, suspicion and rigid control suffocate daily life, and always over it all hangs the long shadow of opium, banned, despised, but still creeping in through smugglers who answer to neither Qing nor taping. Historians still argue whether Hong's ban on opium made any measurable dent in overall consumption. With the coast-wide trade still booming under foreign protection, the heavenly kingdom's dry zones are like small patches of sobriety in a heavily intoxicated body. Symbolic, yes, sufficient. No, as the 1850s grind on, the casualties mount into the millions. You float over battlefields where the dead of both sides lie together, uniforms torn, faces turned skyward as if asking the same unanswered question: was this really heaven's plan? In one ruined village, a former addict clutches both a broken pipe and a taping hymn book, as if unsure which faith failed him first. You rise higher, taking in the scope. Along the coasts, opium ships keep docking, their holds full, their profits secure. Inland, the taping civil war tears provinces apart, recycling grief into more rage. Between them, the Qing state weakens further, its silver drained by foreign indemnities, its legitimacy shredded by rebellion. Opium didn't just cloud minds, it softened the ground beneath the dynasty's feet, so that when the taping earthquake hit, the whole structure shook. Night settles over the Yangtze, the river glinting faintly with starlight and the distant glow of burning towns. You listen, and livelihoods, and beneath the crackle of flames and the murmur of prayers, there's another faint sounding, the slow, tired heartbeat of an empire being asked to survive more than any empire reasonably can. You glide northward along the Piho River, where the air grows crisp and the water narrows into a guarded artery leading to the imperial heart. The year is 1856, and the taping flames still burn inland, but a new spark ignites here. Smaller, more precise, yet destined to reopen the empire's wounds. British and French diplomats approach the river mouth, waving flags of negotiation. Chinese forts bristle with cannons, their commanders confident after years of fending off pirates and rebels. But confidence, like silver, is in short supply these days. You hover above the talks. Foreign envoys demand clarification of treaty rights, more ports open, inland trade allowed, missionaries protected, tariffs adjusted. The Qing officials listen politely, then refuse, citing the same moral sovereignty that once fueled Linzex's fire. To them, every concession feels like another slice from the dragon's hide, but the foreigners don't depart. They send word home: negotiations failed. Prepare for action. Historians still argue whether this was genuine misunderstanding or deliberate provocation. The Chinese saw barbarians demanding too much. The British and French saw an empire too arrogant to adapt. Tensions simmer until October 1856, when a Chinese ship, the Arrow, is boarded by authorities, its British flag allegedly insulted. London erupts in outrage. Parliament votes for war again, framing it as defense of honor. In truth, it's unfinished business cut. More markets, more opium, more silver. You witness the first shots near the PO forts in 1858. British steamers slice through shallow waters, their iron holes shrugging off cannon fire like rain. Chinese gunners load frantically, smoke choking the air, but their weapons, old, mismatched, fire wide or burst. Shells from the gunboats arc with mechanical grace, exploding in brilliant orange blossoms that shatter brick and bone. The river foams with debris. You drift through the haze, hearing screams mingle with the hiss of steam. A quirky footnote from the Chasels. One British officer later wrote that Chinese arrows clattered harmlessly against his ship's armor, like hail on a tin roof. It's the sound of an old world meeting the new, and losing decisively. The Second Opium War, though no one calls it that yet, spreads quickly. Allied forces, British and French, capture Canton, loot its treasuries and march north. You follow them up the coast, in past burning villages and abandoned forts. Imperial defenses crumble under disciplined volleys. By 1860, they reach Tianjin, the gateway to Beijing itself. In the Forbidden City, panic replaces pomp. Doguang is gone, succeeded by his son Xianfeng, who stares at maps as if willing them to change. Courtiers bicker, sue for peace or fight to the death. The emperor flees to Ri, leaving ministers to sign a humiliating convention. More ports open, Kowloon ceded. Legalization of opium trade confirmed. It's Nanking all over again, but sharper, deeper. You float into the foreign legations now sprouting in Beijing. Diplomats in starched collars stroll past horrified locals, their briefcases heavy with new treaties. Missionaries arrive in earnest, Bibles in hand, convinced salvation follows cannonballs. To the Chinese, it's invasion by ink, or every signature carves away sovereignty. Foreign merchants celebrate. Opium flows freer than ever, its price stabilized by legal status. You watch crates unloaded in broad daylight at Shanghai, no more midnight junks needed. The empire's lungs fill steadily, while its treasury empties. Historians still debate the war's true catalyst. Was it the Arrow incident, or simmering resentment over unequal treaties? Whatever the spark, the fire reignites old humiliations. The Qing court, already strained by taping rebels, now fights on two fronts: internal fanaticism and external greed. You linger over the Paiho battlefield, where the river still runs cloudy with silt and sorrow. A Chinese soldier, wounded but alive, clutches a spent cartridge and mutters, "Iron demons from the sea." Nearby, a French marine sketches the fort's ruins, capturing it. Progress, irony as always, is the only impartial witness. Even as cannons cool, the war's shadow lengthens. Inland, taping forces hear of the coastal defeats and mock the Qing as slaves to barbarians. Their heavenly kingdom swells with recruits angry at both Manchu weakness and foreign insolence. The opium trade, now legalized, funds the very powers who protect it, creating a vicious circle no edict can break. You drift back to Beijing's outskirts, where peasants whisper of omens, comets, floods, dreams of burning pipes. The empire feels like a vast body fighting fever with more fever. Opium dulling the pain of rebellion, rebellion fueled by opium's economic ruin. Night falls along the Peiho, lanterns flickering uncertainly on both shores. The water reflects nothing clearly anymore, just fractured light and the slow current carrying debris downstream. You sense this second war isn't an ending, but a pivot. The dragon's roar has become a wheeze, and the world listens not with fear, but opportunistic hunger. You drift through the perfumed halls of Yoiminjin, the old summer palace, where peacocks strut amid manicured gardens and pavilions float like clouds on artificial lakes. This is the Qing Empire's jewel. Vast, exquisite, a testament to centuries of artistry and imperial whim. You can almost taste the air jasmine, polished jade, faint incense from hidden altars. Yet beneath the tranquility, the Second Opium War has turned this paradise into a target. By autumn 1860, Anglo-French forces have pushed to the gates of Beijing. The Xianfeng Emperor flees north to Ri, abandoning his capital in panic. You hover as Allied troops, British in red coats, French in blue, march through suburbs, their boots crunching fallen leaves. Local Manchu bannermen fire scattered shots from walls, but discipline has eroded. Many are high on the very opium the foreigners trade. The invaders pause outside Yomingyuan, awed despite themselves. One British officer writes, "A city of art, not war." But awe doesn't stop orders. Lord Elgin, commanding the British contingent, issues the command "burn it." Not as battle tactic, but punishment. For torturing prisoners, for dragging out the war. Flames leap from the Hall of Supreme Harmony first, then spread like vengeful spirits. You watch the inferno consume silk hangings, porcelain vases shatter in heat, gold leaf curl and blacken. The air fills with acrid smoke. Paper, lacquer, centuries of history reduced to ash. French looters haul out treasures beforehand, zodiac heads, jade books, peacock feathers. British soldiers follow suit, stuffing pockets with curious. By dawn, Yomingjuan is a skeleton of charred beams and glowing embers. The river nearby runs red with reflected firelight. Historians still argue whether the destruction was strategic retaliation or cultural vandalism. Elgin himself later justified it grimly. Better to destroy than let barbarians profit from beauty. Yet the palace's loss haunts China like an open wound. Symbol of humiliation etched in every schoolbook. You glide through the ruins days later. Charred statues stare blindly, melted bronze pools in gardens. Local peasants pick through debris, salvaging jade fragments as talismans. One old gardener weeps beside a toppled pine. This was heaven's earthly mirror. Now it's a scar. Meanwhile, the war ends with the Convention of Peking. More ports open, Kowloon ceded, opium legalized nationwide. Foreigners gain diplomatic immunity, missionary rights, inland travel. The Qing court signs in defeat, silver flowing out faster than ever to pay indemnities. You can almost hear the dragons sigh amid the treaty ink. Foreign powers celebrate. In Shanghai's clubs, champagne toasts mingle with opium smoke. Merchants predict booming trade. Missionaries pack Bibles for the interior. To them, China is a vast market finally cracking open. Like a stubborn oyster yielding to the right leverage. But resentment festers deeper than before. You wander Beijing's hutongs, where whispers turn to curses. They burned our soul. A scholar mutters, hiding a pamphlet calling for unity against demons. Secret societies swell, even officials begin plotting quiet resistance. The palace fire didn't just destroy art. It ignited something unquenchable. A fringe story emerges from the ashes. That ghosts of Yomingjuan now haunt looted artifacts in European museums, causing misfortunes to owners. Superstition, perhaps. But it comforts those who lost everything. You imagine those jade heads in London parlours, silently judging their captors. Opium, ever the silent partner, profits from the chaos. With legal status secured, imports surge. Over 80,000 chests annually by decade's end. You pass dens where addicts, numb to empire's fall, exhale dreams of palaces that no longer stand. The drug that started it all now funds the very humiliation it enabled. Historians still debate if the Summer Palace's loss marked the Qing psychological breaking point. Before, defeat was abstract. After, it's personal. Your home, your heritage, torched for refusing to bow faster. You float above the blackened expanse one last time. Dawn breaks pale over twisted pagodas, birds wheel uncertainly, and somewhere in Ri, the emperor stares at reports, his face ashen as the ruins. The empire's beauty was its armor, now stripped, it stands exposed, vulnerable, forever changed. The scent of charred silk lingers, a ghost that no wind can carry away. You drift across the eastern seaboard, where the empire's coastline now glimmers with foreign concessions like jewels pried from a weakening crown. The Second Opium War has ended, but its legacy tightens like a noose, treaties upon treaties, each one slicing deeper into sovereignty. You can almost feel the map redrawing itself, ink lines carving China into puzzle pieces held by distant hands. By the 1860s, the spheres of influence solidify. Britain claims the Yangtze Valley for trade dominance, France eyes the south for missionaries and rubber, Germany nibbles Shandong, Russia presses north for railways and ports, Japan, once a quiet neighbor, awakens with ambitions of its own. You hover over Shanghai's Bund, where grand European banks tower beside Chinese pawnshops, their clocks chiming Greenwich time over lunar calendars. The air smells of coal smoke, river mud, and unequal exchange. Foreign residents live in walled compounds, extraterritorial bubbles where Qing law doesn't apply. A British merchant caught smuggling pays no fine. A Chinese thief in the same district faces the bamboo. You walk their pristine streets through gas lamps, cricket pitches. Afternoon tea served by local servants paid in coppers. To outsiders, it's civilization exported. To locals peering through gates, it's invasion domesticated. Historians still argue whether these spheres prevented all-out colonization or merely prolonged the agony. Ports like Jianjin and Hankou buzz with hybrid commerce, opium warehouses next to cotton mills, mission schools teaching algebra beside Bible study. Silver flows one way, concessions the other. The Qing government, desperate for revenue, grants mining rights, railway leases, even telegraph lines. All foreign-owned, all treaty sealed. You glide inland to a new railway survey near Peking. Engineers in pith helmets mark paths with flags. Chinese peasants protest, fearing ancestral graves disturbed. Officials wave them away. Progress demands sacrifice. But progress smells like gunpowder and profit, not harmony. Railways symbolize connection. Yet they connect China more to foreign balance sheets than to itself. Opium remains the dark thread weaving it all. Legal now, it funds everything indemnities paid, armies equipped, palaces rebuilt on smaller scales. You pass through a government granary where officials tax incoming chests. Their ledgers neat but their eyes glassy. The empire taxes its own poison, addicted to the revenue as much as the people are to the smoke. A quirky development, foreign firms start branding opium like consumer goods. Superior Patna, Benair's finest. With labels boasting purity and strength, Chinese addicts treat them like connoisseurs, debating blends over pipes. Vice has gone corporate, centuries before anyone coined the term. Resistance simmers quietly. You overhear gentry scholars in tea houses plotting, self-strengthening. Build factories, buy guns, learn Western machines without Western morals. It's a fragile hope. Modernize the tools, preserve the soul. Yet every ship bringing steam engines also unloads opium crates. In the spheres, cultural collision brews odd hybrids. A French missionary in Indochina translates Confucius into Latin. A German trader in Tsingtao brews beer with rice. Missionaries convert thousands, but many baptisms feel like survival pacts. You sense the empire absorbing shocks, bending but not breaking. Yet, historians still debate if the treaty system was imperialism's masterpiece or its fatal overreach. It gave powers economic control without the mess of full occupation, but resentment built like pressure in a sealed pot. You float over a treaty port at dusk. Lanterns glow in foreign club, Chinese dens smolder nearby. A rickshaw coolie pauses, wiping sweat, and mutters to himself. They own the roads now, but not our hate. Simple words, but they echo the truth. Further north, Russia's influence creeps via the Amur River. Vast territories ceded in panic treaties. Railways snaking toward Mongolia. Japan watches hungrily, its Meiji reforms turning isolation into empire building. The dragon, once alone at the world's center, now shares its cave with wolves. Every concession demands more tariff, autonomy lost, post offices foreign run, even lighthouses built by British engineers. The king court signs, pays, complains in poetry. You visit a ministry where clerks stamp documents with trembling hands, knowing each one erodes the mandate of heaven a little further. Night deepens, stars obscured by coastal fog. You rise above the patchwork coast. Spheres glowing like lit fuses, the heartland dark with unrest. The web tightens, silk threads of commerce spun from cannon barrels. Opium smoke curls through it all, the invisible glue holding humiliation in place. The empire endures, but at what cost? You drift into the treaty ports, where dawn breaks over a bizarre marriage of worlds. Shanghai's waterfront hums first. Steamboats whistle, coolies haul crates, and foreign flags snap above counting houses. The air mixes coal soot, frying dough, and opium's persistent sweetness. Here, East and West don't merely trade, they collide in perpetual awkwardness. Walk the Bundong neoclassical banks with marble columns face junks laden with rice sacks. A British clerk sips morning tea from porcelain-stamped Qing Dynasty, oblivious to the irony. Nearby, a tourist priest burns ghost money beside a Methodist chapel, muttering charms against foreign devils. You can almost hear the gods debating whether to laugh or intervene. Historians still argue if these ports modernized China or hollowed it out. To you, they feel like experimental zones, laboratories where empire meets commerce, tradition meets steam. British clubs serve gin with chopsticks. French tailors sew capots from Paris silk. Missionaries hand out tracts in pidgin Mandarin. Jesus saves from opium. Recipients nod politely, then sell the paper for pipe cleaners. You wander a bustling market. Vendors hawk everything Western, clocks ticking erratically. Indian cottons dyed crimson. Local fans painted with anti-barbarian caricatures. A German engineer demonstrates a sewing machine to awed seamstresses. Across the aisle, a fortune teller reads palms using tarot imported from Marseille. Cultural genre confusion, the line blurs. Opium dens thrive openly now, their bamboo signs promising pure dreams. You peer inside, wanting merchants in frock coats share pipes with mandarins in silk, conversation drifting between stock prices and Confucian verse. This smoke clears the mind. One insists, eyes half-lidded. The other chuckles, like your treaty clauses, sweet until they bind. 3 laughs ripple out, light as the haze. Resentment simmers beneath. You overhear dockworkers cursing. Ghost faces who pay starvation wages. Secret tried meetings convene in back alleys, plotting sabotage. One night, you witness a subtle revengey urchins pelt a foreign carriage with rotten eggs, vanishing into shadows before guards react. Small acts, but they accumulate like gunpowder grains. Missionaries add another layer. You visit a Sunday service where converts sing hymns to organ music echoing off pagoda roofs. The preacher rails against opium as Satan's tool. Congregants amend heartily, then slip out to buy a pipe on the way home. Faith competes with chemistry, and chemistry usually wins. A fringe rumor claims some priests smuggle Bibles inside hollow opium balls, holy contraband. Whether true or not, it captures the absurdity. British clubs with expatriate life cricket on manicured fields. Theatre troupes performing Shakespeare with Chinese extras, dances where waltzes mingle with a who strings. Wives fan themselves, gossiping about heathen habits. Husbands tally ledgers, dreaming of knighthoods. To them, this is empire at its enlightened peak. You glide to a quieter corner, a hybrid tea house where intellectuals debate, self-strengthening. Arsenals copy Western guns, shipyards build steamers, telegraphs string across provinces. Progress. Yes, but always one step behind, funded by the same opium taxes it aims to escape. Learn their machines. Keep our soul, one says. Another sighs. Machines come with souls attached. Night falls, lanterns blooming like fireflies. You float above a port festival. Fireworks clash with church bells, dragon dances weave past horse carriages. Laughter rises from dens, curses from alleys, prayers from chapels. The collision generates heat, sometimes light, often friction. Historians still argue whether the treaty ports sowed seeds of revolution or reform. They birthed compradors. Chinese middlemen thriving on foreign trade, and sparked envy that fueled later upheavals. Opium remains the undercurrent, its smoke curling through every transaction like invisible accounting. You pause over the harbor, ships at anchor like sleeping beasts. A junk glides past a steamer, their wakes crossing without merging. That's the empire now, parallel worlds brushing, but never blending, resentment building in the space between. Somewhere in the dark water below, sunken treasures whisper of what was lost, and what might yet rise. You slip behind the vermilion walls of the forbidden city, where silk rustles like whispers and the air carries faint orchard perfume. Amid the throne's golden shadow sits Cixi, not yet the Dowager Empress, but already the power that dare not speak its name. She watches from behind embroidered screens, her gaze sharp as hidden daggers. Guiding an empire adrift on opium tides and foreign concessions, Cixi enters history quietly, a concubine elevated by fate when the Xianfeng emperor dies young, leaving a toddler son. You hover as she orchestrates the coup. Loyal generals seize key gates, reformist princes are sidelined, and she declares herself regent. No armies clash, just murmurs in corridors and seals stamped overnight. By 1861, at 25, she rules through a child emperor, her authority veiled in filial piety. Historians still argue whether Cixi was ruthless pragmatist or visionary guardian. To you drifting through her audiences, she feels like survival incarnate. Silk-wrapped steel preserving a dynasty from its own rot, she navigates crises with feline grace. The Taiping Rebellion rages. Cixi backs generals like Xing Gufon, arming them with Western rifles bought discreetly, beat the rebels with barbarian guns. She reportedly quips, then turn the guns on barbarians. You watch her approve funds from opium taxes, ironic fuel for purification campaigns. Inland, Xing's Xiang army crushes Taiping strongholds, but not without millions dead and provinces scoured. Foreign pressures mount, yet Cixi plays long games. When envoys demand more concessions, she smiles, delays diverts with banquets. Behind screens, she pores over maps, learning steamship routes and tariff ledgers. Know your enemy's strength, she tells advisors before you test it. Her court blends old rituals, ancestor worship, eunuch intrigue, with new tools, telegraphs humming inside chambers. You glimpse her private moments, pacing jade floors at midnight, fuming over reports of coastal dens where officials smoke openly. She bans opium again, executes high addicts publicly, but enforcement bends around revenue needs. A light sarcasm slips into her commands. Let the weak perish, the dynasty endures. 3 chuckles from attendants, quickly stifled. A quirky ritual marks her rule. She commissions massive marble boats on Coming Lake, symbols of naval power that never sail. Lavish, immobile, they float like dreams of strength. Critics call them folly, supporters propaganda. You float beside one at dusk, its stone hull gleaming, reflecting an empire that looks solid but drifts. Reformers petition her to build factories, schools, armies. Cixi listens, approves arsenals in Shanghai, a naval yard in Fuzhou. The self-strengthening movement blooms under her nod, Western technology cloaked in Confucian virtue. Yet she draws Linus, no parliaments, no impresses in trousers. Change the skin, keep the heart, becomes her unspoken creed. Opium shadows everything. Imports peak, addiction widespread, yet Cixi taxes it ruthlessly, using proceeds for modernization. You overhear a minister joke, the dragon smokes to buy its own wings. She silences him with a glance, but her lips twitch, acknowledging the bind. Foreigners test her constantly. A French mission demands exemptions, Russians push border claims. Cixi maneuvers grant minor rights, extract trade favors. When Japan modernizes aggressively, she watches warily, funding spies in Tokyo. Her web of eunuchs and generals gathers secrets like silk threads. Historians still debate her legacy, savior who delayed collapse or conservative who stifled true change. In her audiences, you see a woman balancing on a knife's edge. Too much reform invites chaos, too little conquest. You drift to her gardens at twilight, where she walks alone, fan fluttering. Punies nod in breeze, distant cannon practice echoes from new forts. She pauses, whispers to the winding, "This throne is mine to hold, not yours to take." The empire for a moment feels anchored by sheer will, yet cracks show. Court factions feud, eunuchs scheme, silver shortages bite deeper. Opium's haze clouds judgment at every level. Cixi preserves the form, dragon banners, imperial edicts, but the substance erodes. Her silk authority both shields and suffocates what remains. Night cloaks the palace. Lanterns sway like hesitant stars. You sense her power as a fragile dam against floods of change, resentment, addiction. The dragon endures under her watch, but whispers grow. How long before the screen falls? You wander Beijing's dusty outer streets in the sweltering summer of 1900, where the air thickens with dust devils and desperate chants. Shadowy figures in red turbans and sashes gather in allies. Boxers, they call themselves, or Yihichuan, the Righteous Harmony Society. No guns, no uniforms, just fists, spears, and a burning conviction that foreign devils have poisoned China's soul with opium, Christianity, and greed. These aren't soldiers but peasants, artisans, the dispossessed, men whose farms failed under tax burdens, whose brothers faded into opium dreams. You hear their leaders preach invincibility. Our fists are iron, bullets turn to water. Supernatural claims spread like fever. Trance rituals where boxers slash themselves without bleeding. Convinced ancestral spirits shield them. To the humiliated masses, it's the last stand of magic against machines. Historians still argue whether the boxers were patriotic reformers or blind fanatics. You drift through their camps, seeing rage distilled, effigies of missionaries burned, pipes smashed, treaty papers torn. Expel the foreigners, kill the secondary devils. They shoot. Secondary meaning Chinese Christians or compradors. Opium dens are torched first, flames leaping like applause. The Qing court watches warily. Cixi, ever the pragmatist, initially suppresses them, then, as resentment boils, quietly encourages. Use their fury, she tells advisors. By June, boxer militias swarm toward Beijing, swelling to hundreds of thousands. Imperial troops stand aside or join. You feel the capital tense like a bowstring. Foreign legations hunker down. Diplomats, missionaries, families barricaded behind sandbags. Telegraph wires hum with pleas for help. Boxers besiege them for 55 days and arrows whistle over walls. Fires rage nearby. Taunts echo through nights. Inside, children cry, adults ration bullets. You hover above, hearing prayers in English, Mandarin, French mingle in the dust. Allied forces assembling. 8 nations. Britain, France, Germany, Japan, Russia, America, Italy, Austria. Land marines at Tianjin. Their advance is merciless. Machine guns mow down boxer charges. Villages burn in retaliation. You witness one clash. Boxers rush with spears and talismans. Bullets reply in crimson arcs. The iron fists crumple like paper. Cixi flees to Xi'an as the Allies sack Beijing. You follow her caravan silts, pitched in haste, you nudge clutching scrolls. The Empress Dowager weeps publicly, then plots privately. Foreign troops loot freely. Summer palaces again, although Yominjan's ruins offer little left. Kaiser Wilhelm urges his men to give no quarter, turning revenge into theatre. The siege breaks, legations relieved. China sues for peace. The Boxer proto-demands massive indemnities, executions of leaders, foreign garrisons in Beijing. Cixi smiles for photographers and whispers to Alice, endure humiliation to survive. A fringe belief lingers among survivors, Boxer talismans really worked, but heaven withdrew protection when Qing betrayed them. Superstition clings like smoke to scorched earth. Opium, undefeated, watches from the sidelines. Ports reopen days after fighting ends, dens refill. The rebellion blamed foreigners but ignored the dragon's addiction. Self-inflicted wound, deeper than any treaty knife. Historians still debate the Boxer's impact. Death throes of tradition or spark for nationalism. You see exhausted faces in Beijing's ruins, Boxers scattered. Foreigners entrenched, Qing shamed anew. You float over the legation quarter at dusk. Allied sentries patrol, Chinese begars scavenge. A lone Boxer pamphlet blows in wind, rise again. The empire staggers on, its last desperate stand faded to ash. You slip through the latticed doors of a modest Beijing courtyard at twilight, where the scent of boiled rice mingles with something earthier, more insidious. Opium's sticky perfume wafting from every third household. By the late Qing era, addiction has woven itself into the national fabric. no longer a vice but a rhythm. Morning pipes for laborers to steady hands, afternoon draws for scholars chasing clarity, evening rituals beside family altars. The empire inhales as one. You enter a typical den, dim, pillowed, lit by flickering lamps. A cross-section of china gathers. A former boxer clutching his sash like a talisman, a treaty port comprador in western vest, a village widow selling heirlooms for her fix. Pipes glow amber as they inhale, exhaling sights that blend into murmurs of regret and resignation. It quiets the world's noise. The widow says softly, the others nod, eyes distant as dreams. No longer hidden, opium is infrastructure. Government-licensed farms in Saigon bloom with poppies. Taxes fund everything from palace repairs to army rice. You drift to a tax office where clerks weigh incoming resin, stamping receipts with imperial seals. One jokes dryly, we grow our own chains now. Laughter fades into coughs. The dragon funds its cage. Historians still argue peak numbers. Perhaps 50 million addicts by 1900, 1 in 4 adult males. You see it in hollow cheeks, sluggish markets, abandoned fields. Families pass pipes like heirlooms. Children learn the ritual before addicts. In rural hovels, ancestral tablets watch over smoke curls. In urban salons, intellectuals debate reform mid-high. You glide through a scholar's study piled with yellowed scrolls. He puffs thoughtfully, quill pausing. Confucius taught moderation. He muses, but this moderates us. His pipe ember pulses like a faltering heartbeat. Once, addiction shamed elites. Now it unites them in shared stupor. Everyday life adapts. Weddings feature blessing pipes. Funerals include a final draw for the departed soul. Doctors prescribe it for nerves. Ignoring the irony of healing with poison, you witness a village clinic. Patients line up for tinctures. The healer's own hands trembling slightly. Foreigners profit serenely. You visit a Shanghai warehouse where British firms auction Indian grades. Smooth, reliable, empire branded. Local rivals undercut with domestic poppy, cheaper but harsher. Competition breeds quality, or so they claim. A quirky evolution. Pipes now carved with anti-foreign motifs. Dragons devouring ships, sold to addicts who curse the trade even as they partake. Resistance flickers faintly. Temperance societies form in missions, preaching sobriety with pamphlets and tea. A few succeed in villages, but urban pull is stronger. You overhear a missionary lament. We save souls, the smoke reclaims bodies. Even reform stalls. Self-strengthening factories hire stoned workers, output erratic as highs. In palaces, Sixies court mirrors the malaise. Eunuchs smuggle premium resin, ministers doze through audiences. You sense the mandate fraying, not from rebellion alone, but this quiet surrender. The Son of Heaven rules a nation dreaming awake, unresponsive to crises. Night deepens. You float above rooftops where countless lamps glow softly, a constellation of haze. Lullabies hush children. Grandparents recount glories unpiped dulled. Addiction as normalcy, the empire's greatest tragedy, not swords or treaties, but this velvet erosion of will. One last pipe fades in a distant window. The smoker slumps, at peace. You wonder if clarity awaits the other side, or just more smoke. You drift lazily through the twilight corridors of the forbidden city, where lanterns sway like fading stars and the once commanding echoes now sound muffled, distant. The late 1800s have worn the Qing Dynasty to a threadbare silk robe. Treaty ports buzzing with foreign energy, inland provinces smoldering from rebellion, and opium's haze draping everything like perpetual dusk. The dragon sleeps not in majestic repose, but in exhausted stupor, its breath shallow and ragged. Sixie still rules from behind her screens, her authority a mix of iron will and wary improvisation. You hover during a late council, ministers shuffling reports of failed harvests, Russian encroachments, Japanese saber rattling. One drones about naval reforms, another begs for more silver from opium duties. Sixie's fan snaps shut. Dreams cost nothing, she says dryly, but ships sink without them. A ripple of nervous chuckles fades into silence. The court feels like a machine grinding on rust. Eunuchs whispering intrigues, princes plotting irrelevancies, edicts issued to appease ghosts of glory. Reformers gather in shadows, there. 100 days. Experiment crushed when sides with conservatives. You witness the falut, young officials beheaded, scrolls burned, hope snuffed. Yet whispers persist. Kang Yui's exiled pamphlet smuggled back, calling for constitutional monarchy. The emperor, Guangxu, a puppet in her hands, stares blankly from his throne, perhaps dreaming of agency amid the pipe smoke that permeates even these halls. In the outer provinces, warlords carve fiefdoms, taxing poppy fields to fund private armies. You glide over Yunnan's misty hills, where crimson blossoms carpet valleys under guard towers. Local bosses grow richer than mandarins, their loyalty bought with silver, not virtue. The center weakens, periphery drifts into autonomy. Remember Lin Zex's burning crates at Human? Those ashes have fertilized this fragmented garden. Historians still argue if the Qing could have awakened, industrialized faster, reformed deeper. You sense the truth in the lethargic. Decades of humiliation and narcotics dulled not just bodies but the national spine. Innovation stalls, talent flees to foreign concessions or rebels. Scholars debate Western books by lamplight, pipes at hand, conclusions dissolving into vapor. A light joke circulates in tea houses. The dragon sleeps so soundly, even thunder thinks it's snoring. Laughter follows, but eyes betray fear. Boxers' fanaticism faded, yet their anger simmers in student groups, reading smuggled newspapers from Japan. Nationalists brew quietly, blaming Manchus more than merchants now. You visit a fading naval yard in Fuzhou, where half-built ironclads rust beside scaffolds. Workers smoke openly during breaks, productivity as hazy as their vision. Sixie's self-strengthening, yielded arsenals and yards, but no unified will. When Japan sinks the fleet at Yalu River in 1895, the defeat stings like salt in old wounds. Another treaty, more territory lost, indemnity crushing. The dragon twitches but doesn't rise. Eunuchs in the palace hoard antiques, selling them quietly to foreigners. You overhear one bargaining a jade seal. For this, enough smoke for a year. Corruption as commonplace as breathing. Sixie turns a blind eye, prioritizing survival over purge. Her portraits multiply, stern, maternal, plastered on walls as talismans against collapse. Foreigners press closer, railways crisscross without permission, loans come with strings of advisors. You float over a new line near Peking, coolies laying track under German overseers. Peasants protest grave desecrations, officials quell with opium handouts. Progress paved over tradition, one spike at a time. Night cloaks the capital. You rise above the palace roofs, curved like frozen waves. Below, lamps dot courtyard sparsely, fewer than in brighter decades. The dragon's slumber deepens, ministers retire early, guards nod off, even watchmen puff pipes under stars. Dreams replace decrees, memory supplants momentum. One final vision, a court put pens lines by flickering light. The celestial realm nods, heavy-lidded, as rivers run to forgotten seas. He exhales smoke, quill dropping. The empire mirrors him, poised on the edge of awakening or eternal night. You awaken to the brittle crackle of gunfire echoing through Watching's narrow streets. October 1911, a spark that finally ignites the tin box of a dying dynasty. Revolutionaries long simmering in secret societies and student cells seize armories and declare independence from Qing rule. You drift through the Chaucer soldiers defecting, crowds cheering, Manchu banners torn down like yesterday's decrees. The air smells of gunpowder and fragile hope, opium's haze momentarily chased by adrenaline. Word spreads like wildfire. Provinces from Hubei to Guangdong secede one by one. Sun Yat-sen, exiled visionary of republican dreams, returns from America to lead the fray. You hover beside him in Nanjing as delegates convene, debating constitutions amid stacks of smuggled Western books. End the emperor, end the humiliation, they chant. For them, opium symbolizes not just addiction, but the rot of foreign treaties and imperial weakness. In Beijing, panic grips the court. Sixie is gone, poisoned or faded. The boy Emperor Pai, a child on a vast throne, stares wide-eyed as regents beg for mercy. Generals like Yuan Shiqi play both sides, extracting concessions from revolutionaries while feigning loyalty. You witness audiences where edicts tremble in Hanzog's abdication looms, inevitable as dawn. February 1912 seals it. The boy emperor steps down, the last Qing seal stamped on republican birth. You float above the ceremony, crowds wave tricolors, intellectuals toast, Mr. Democracy and Mr. Science. Fireworks burst, briefly outshining pipe lamps. The dragon falls without a roar, just paperwork and sighs. Historians still argue if 1911 was true revolution or elite shuffle. To you, it feels like catharsis after decades of stupor, a nation blinking awake, shaking off narcotic fog and Manchu silk. Yet inheritance weighs heaving warlord armies, foreign concessions intact, opium trade thriving under new flags. You wander revolutionary strongholds, intellectuals smash opium catches publicly, preaching sobriety as national rebirth. Crowds cheer though dens refill by nightfall. Sun's Tong Menghai promises land reform, unity, enter spheres of influence. Idealism burns bright, but reality lurks, fragmented military, empty treasury, addicts unchanged. Foreign powers watch warily. Britain, France, Japan send notes of recognition, laced with treaty reaffirmations. Opium ships dock uninterrupted. Legations remain sovereign islands. Revolution changes rulers, not balance sheets. A British consul quips over brandy. New masters, same markets. Dry as dust. Rural folk celebrate cautiously. You visit a village where peasants burn a king portrait beside poppy plants. Dual exorcism. No more emperors, no more smoke, an elder declares. His son nods, but eyes the burned field hungrily. Habits die slower than dynasties. Yuan Shikai, the fat spider, maneuvers to presidency, betraying son for power. You see the republic fracture early. Federalists vs centralists, nationalists vs warlords. Down breaks brittle, promising light but delivering shadows. A quirky postscripting Pui, the last emperor, retires to the forbidden city under pension, playing with toy soldiers amid ghosts. Revolution spares the boy, but not the system he symbolized. You rise above the Yangtze at dawn, river glinting with tentative gold. The republic steers, trains whistle, students march, factories hum faintly. Opium ghosts linger, treaties bind, but for one fragile moment, China breathes freer. Awakening tastes bittersweet, like tea without the haze. You navigate the fractured patchwork of 19's China, where the Republic's flag flies over chaos, and cigarette smoke mingles with opium haze in warlord fiefdoms. Yuan Shikai crowns himself emperor briefly, only to die amid mutiny. Power splinters into regional strongmen who rule with rifles and poppy profits. You drift through their domains. Saiquan's misty highlands, Shaanxi's dusty plains, where every general funds his army with narco-taxes, turning civil strife into the world's largest black market. In Zheng Zuling's Manchuria, you see its starkly opium refineries, disguised as tea factories, guarded by machine gun nests, peasants forced to plant poppies under quota, harvest guarded like gold. Revenue buys Japanese arms, bribes mistresses. Zhang, the old marshal, puffs imported cigars while counting silver from exports. Most shipped to Shanghai's foreign concessions, untouched by republican law. War is expensive, he shrugs to aides, but this pays dividends. You glide south to Feng Yoxiang's Christian army, where the general preaches sobriety yet tolerates dens to fund campaigns. Irony as politic soldiers raid rivals' poppy fields by day, sell the whore by night. A light jest among troops, we fight opium with opium. Victory tastes bitter. Laughter cracks like dry earth. Historians still argue if warlords prolonged opium's grip or merely capitalized on it. You witness the cycle. Addiction weakens peasants, taxes crush survivors, revolts breed more warlords who tax poppies harder. By 1920, domestic production rivals India's, purity drops, prices plummet, reach expands. Dens dot every town. Hovel pipes for poor, silver inlaid for elites. You enter a Hunan warlord's banquet hall, where narco-barons toast alliances over bubbling hookahs. Maps unroll showing trade routes, smuggler paths evading weak republican customs. Opium caravans guarded by mercenaries snake through mountains, ambushed only by hungrier rivals. Generals swap daughters, territories, recipes for reason yield. The Republic's capital in Beijing changes hands like a poker chip, each winner addicted to the revenue. Foreigners thrive in the interstices. You visit Tianjin's concessions, where British firms auction warlord opium legally, profits wired to London. Missionaries decree the yellow imperial of vice. Traders shrug, supply meets demand. A fringe room some warlords brew, Christian cure-alls. Laced with dilute opium, sold to gullible converts. Faith and pharmacology, uneasy bedfellows, peasants suffer most. You walk a poppy field under whip-crack supervision. Forced labor, meager rations, dreams dangled as payment. Harvest ends in exhaustion, products shipped to dens where the poor buy back death in grams. Families cycle through highs and hunger, children orphaned to the trade. Republican idealists rail from newspapers. End the warlords, end the poison. Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang promises eradication, but his armies march on empty stomachs. Communists stir in shadows, preaching class war over chemical chains. Yet warlords endure. Their narco-empires are web too tangled for single scissors. You hover over a battlefield near Wuhan. Clashing armies, spent shells, medics dosing wounded with opium tinctures. Irony compounds the drug that bankrolls war heals its victims, prolonging the fight. A dying captain gasps, tell them. The smoke won. Night falls across the land. Lamp glows speckle hills like fallen stars, each a den feeding the beast. The Republic dawns without teeth, warlords reigning in opium shadow. China fragments further, each shard glazed with haze. You trudge the endless trails of northern Shaanxi, feet sinking into loose dust, whipped by relentless wind. October 1934. Around you stretches the Red Army, tattered, starving, maybe 80,000 souls, including camp followers, fleeing encirclement by nationalist forces. This is the Long March, Mao Zedong's desperate gamble to save the communist revolution from annihilation. You feel the exhaustion in every labored breath, the bite of cold that seeps through threadbare uniforms. Yet amid the haze of opium's lingering empire, a new clarity hardens. The march begins as rout. Jiang Jishi's Kuomintang, backed by German advisors and American loans, squeezes communist bases in Jiangxi. Bullets whistle. Planes buzz overhead like angry wasps. You drift beside Mao as he rallies stragglers, advance to the northwest. Turn enemies rear into our front. His voice cuts sharp, unyielding. They cross rivers on makeshift rafts, scale snow peaks barefoot, fight ambushes at every pass. Opium shadows the path. Warlords they evade grow poppies for nationalist taxes. Stragglers tempted by dens fall behind. Mao bans the drug harshly. Executions for traders, labor for addicts. The people's enemy within, he calls it, linking Borgia's vice to imperialist chains. You see patrols smash pipes, burn catches, force detox amid marches. Harsh medicine for a harsh road. Historians still argue the march's true length. 6,000 miles over a year, crossing 11 provinces, 24 rivers, 18 mountains. Casualties, decimate thing disease, starvation, betrayal. Only 8,000 survive to Yan. You witness river crossings where women bind babies to backs, currents claiming hundreds. Snowstorms bury trails, frostbite claims toes. Yet songs rise defiant. The Red Army fears nothing. You float over a night bivouac. Sentries huddle by weak fires, sharing corn cobs boiled to mush. Mao debates tactics in a cave, lamp smoke curling like old ghosts. Opium withdrawal shakes them, sweats, cramps, but ideology dulls the pain. Revolution purifies. A commissar insists, rationing laudanum for the worst cases from captured warlord stashes. Ironing enemies' poison aids escape. Nationalists pursue relentlessly, their planes dropping leaflets mocking bandit march. Jiang boasts total victory, scouts report otherwise. Communists use opium taxes ironically, raiding warlord depots to fund porters' medicine. A light jest among marchers, we steal their dreams to fuel ours. Laughter warms colder than blankets. You cross the great grasslands, mud-sucking boots, mosquitoes swarming, horses die. Survivors eat leather. Then, looting bridge. Chain cables over raging torrent, defended by machine guns. Commandos crawl across under fire, bayonets flashing, seizing the span. Legend swells it mythic, reality bleeds enough. In Yan'an caves, survivors dig in. Mao emerges supreme, his guerrilla wisdom forged in March fire. You sense transformation, opium rotted China births, steel-willed vanguard. The long march isn't victory, but survival, seed for future harvest. A fringe tale, some soldiers claim opium visions guided them through blizzards, ghosts of ancestors pointing north. Superstition or survival myth. It comforts the broken. Historians still debate if the march was genius or madness. You see ragged figures atop a ridge, darned gilding faces gaunt but fierce. Below, the empire's woods, walled fields, treaty scars, fade into distance. Revolution marches on, one painful step from narcotic slumber. You descend into the smoky underbelly of mid-century China, where red banners flutter over rallies and the crack of loudspeakers pierces the dawn. The 1950s dawn under Mao's republic, victorious after years of civil war, but opium's ghost clings stubborn as rust. Communist cadres fan out to villages, cities, factories, armed not just with rifles but resolved to purge the narcotic empire once and for all. First come the campaign's mass meetings in town squares, where addicts confess publicly, crowds roaring approval. You stand amid one in Shanghai, thousands packed shoulder to shoulder, a former warlord's son paraded on stage trembling. "I smoke to forget defeat," he admits, voice breaking. "Now I serve the people." Cheers erupt. He's sent to labor camp for reform through toil. No mercy, no half measures. Propaganda blankets Walzo posters of heroic workers smashing pipes, dragons devouring poppy fields. Slogans blaring opium is the enemy of production. You drift through a Beijing den raid. Soldiers kick indoors, haul out bubbling lamps, drag users to clinics. Resin piles burn in pyres, stench thick as defeat. Cadres lecture imperialism's last chain. Break it. Historians still argue the scaling millions treated, thousands executed as traders. Methods brutal, forced detox with acupuncture, group struggle sessions, withdrawal rages like storms, sweats, visions, rage, yet ideology anchors. Endure for the revolution. You witness a clinic where patients chant Mao quotes through delirium, turning agony communal. Domestic poppy fields raised systematically. You hover over cyclone valleys, once crimson seas, now plowed under for grain. Warlord remnants flee or submit, hidden labs smashed. By 1953, production craters. Imports long banned under embargo. Republic's writ reaches remote hills, tractors tilling vice into soil. Urban sweeps intensify. You walk a reform through labor. Camp X addicts till fields, build dams, recite self-criticism. Guards patrol sternly, but some relent with captured stashes for medicinal use. Hypocrisy flickers, quickly stamped. A light purge joke whispers among inmates. We quit opium for a harder drug, Quatus. Guard laughs it off, but vigilance tightens. International eyes watch. Foreign papers decry. Red terror. Cadres retort. Liberation from poison. Missionaries expelled. Their cures dismissed as bourgeois. Indigenous methods prevail. Group therapy via criticism. Acupuncture needles pricking meridians. Success rates climb. Relapse drops as society rebuilds sans temptation. You glide through a model village post-campaigning. Collectives hum. Children drill hygiene songs. Elders smoke tobacco only. Banners proclaim New China, clean lungs. Contrast stings. Recall Canton dens of old. Now factories belching productive steam. Revolution's broom sweeps through. Resistance crumbles. Holdout traders executed publicly. Addicts reintegrate as reformed elements. By later 1950, opium vanishes from daily life, eradicated not by wish but will. You sense the shifting. Empire's narcotic fever breaks, leaving scarred but sober body politic. A fringe echo some elders claim withdrawal dreams haunted them years later. Ghostly pipes calling. Superstition fades with progress. Historians still debate if purges healed or scarred deeper. You see cadres patting backs at harvest festivals, faces flushed with grain alcohol, not resin. China X wails cleaner, strides forward. Opium's century-long chokehold finally snapped by collective fist. You settled gently into the neon glow of modern Beijing, where skyscrapers pierce the night like jade pagodas reborn, and the hum of electric life drowns ancient echoes. Highways snake past restored hutongs. Bullet trains whisper through countryside once dotted with poppy fields. The year is now, and China stands transformed. Economic titan. Global voice. But museums whisper of the opium century, cautionary holograms flickering in halls of memory. Walk the Bundagang, colonial facades house luxury brands, tourist selfie under lights where once gunboats anchored. No foreign spheres now, concessions long dissolved in revolution's fire. You drift through the National Museum, past replicas of humans burning crates, Treaty of Nanking's faded ink, Yuminjan's charred stones. Plaques declaring, century of humiliation ended by people's will. Schoolchildren touch interactive maps, tracing opium roots like scars on a healed body. Opium's shadow, eradicated domestically, a ghost story for classrooms. Global policy echoes it, strict controls. Aid to poppy-plagued neighbors. You overhear guides. We burned the poison, now we build. Pride swells, earned through purges and perseverance. Recall Lin Zex's moral thunder. His statue stands in Canton, arm raised eternally. Historians still argue interpretations, from imperialist plot to self-inflicted wound. Exhibits balance both, British greed, Qing denial, people's suffering. Interactive timelines let visitors choose paths. What if no war, no addiction? Game's end same resilience prevails. You glide to Jiananmen, vast square pulsing with evening crowds. Vendors sell silk fans painted with dragons unchained. Elders practice Tai Chi under floodlights. No haze of pipe smoke, air crisp with progress. Nearby, high-speed rail stations bustle. Connections to world, not subjugation. Shanghai's skyline rivals any. Shenzhen blooms from fishing village to tech mecca. Soft power radiates belt and road echoes old Silk Road, but mutual now. Museums abroad return looted artifacts. Zodiac heads home, gestures of respect. Opium wars taught caution, today's dragon trades strength for partnership. A light exhibit joke and holographic British merchant offers pipe. Dragon exhales digital fire, laughter echoes. Fringe whispers persist. Underground collectors hoard antique pipes as relics, rural tales of ghost poppy, fields yielding visions. Folklore, harmless. Policy firm zero tolerance. Global leader in rehab models. You rise above the Great Wall at sunset, restored bricks glowing amber. Below, the land that endured smoke, war, division now thrives. Unified, vigilant. Opium destroyed nothing permanently, it forged steel from silk. Echoes fade into neon pulse, proof empires don't die. They evolve wiser, unbowed. Sweet dreams await in this reclaimed light. End of story. Sweet dreams.